never even thought that I ever would see one. And I didn't, at that time, like I said before, I hadn't seen a footprint. And so I was still what you might call a skeptic, because I just didn't understand, and I didn't really think that I knew they had to exist.
Please support this channel by subscribing and leaving comments.
Adjust your radio frequency. This is not a test.
Across every time zone and in both hemispheres, it's the Artist First program, Bigfoot Central, with your host, Robert W. Morgan. I'm Scott Z, working the boards tonight. Steve Jones, longtime fan and family member of the station, is also in the studio with us tonight, and the long-awaited guest. And we want to mention right out of the gate, we want to thank Mr. Tom Cousineau, formerly from Walnut Creek, California, that helped arrange this interview tonight. And what a guest we have tonight. One of the two men responsible for the best evidence ever of Bigfoot. We have Mr. Bob Gimlin on the program. But first, let's introduce our host, Mr. Robert W. Morgan.
Well. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are around the world. I'm Robert W. Morgan, and I welcome you back again. Last week, we had so many hits on this. It's amazing that you folks sit down, turn on your computer, tune into the show, and sit there for an hour every other week and 2 hours every other the opposite weeks to listen to our ramblings. But you know what? We have had some special guests. Every guest we have is special. But tonight, we have Bob Gimlin. And I needn't really introduce him to you, but I will to those of you perhaps in London who may have missed out. But Bob was... as they say in bank robbers, he was holding the horses. when Roger Patterson, his partner, took what I think is the most important evidence to date proving the existence of Bigfoot. Bob, thank you so much for coming on board.
Hey, I'm very happy to be here, and good evening, folks. Like you say, wherever you are, it's where I am at 6 o'clock. Tuesday evening, and I live in Yakima, Washington.
And that's a beautiful area to be, that's for sure. I'm so familiar with that area because I spent so much time getting my butt frozen off up there at Mount Adams.
Right, yeah, certainly.
We were talking before we came on the air. Bob and I spent a very short period of time together when he was loading up some horses. And unfortunately, it's been good. What's it been, 20-some years?
Yeah, 20-some years, Robert.
That's a shame. The last time I think we spoke, we said we were going to have a couple of beers together.
Yeah, I think so.
Good God, it's been a long time. Anyway, Bob, you've become almost a legendary and a cult figure. I know you may not realize it, but you have an awful lot of fans that think so highly of you because of the integrity that you've shown and the respect that you've shown for what you've done and all that. And I truly, it's so complimentary to the science. I think you've done an awful lot, just simply the way you've handled things.
Well, Robert, I feel kind of humble because I didn't feel that I did anything extra special. The only thing is, over the years, there's been a lot of changes about the opinion of people about these things because there's been so much evidence. But at the time, it was kind of, I didn't feel at all like I did anything special, and even didn't think Roger was doing anything such a special thing at that time, except the fact that we did get some film footage of this creature.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Bob, what took you guys to that particular area?
Well, can I go back and start why we went down there?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll start with some dates, Robert. About in September, before Labor Day weekend, I'd taken a couple days off from work. I was working construction. Roger wanted to go over in the Mount St. Helens area and do some scouting around on the horseback. So I loaded my truck, which was a 1-ton Chevrolet dual-wheel truck, and we went over in that area. And going in there, well, I never realized that it had that the top of the truck was covered with canvas over the back of the truck, and I never realized going in and hitting some low limbs that we punched a few holes in this canvas. And so we rode around up in there and didn't find any footprints, but we were going to stay in there for quite a few days, but it started raining, really raining hard. And I mean, it rained and it rained and it rained and it rained.
It's famous. I was up there 32 days one time, and it rained every day.
So you can understand what we were going through. So everything we had was just really soaked. So about, I think 3 or 4 days after Labor Day, I can't remember how long we put up with that. Our wet gear and everything wet, even our sleeping bags was wet to sleep in. So we came on back to Yakima, and then returning to Yakima, Roger had gotten a phone call from somebody down there. I don't know whether it was Al Hodgson or who it was in that Willow Creek or Bluff Creek area, that they had been building logging roads back through the mountains there to do some logging, and they had put a tank in, pulled a fifth-wheel tank back in there, and I thought it was a fuel tank, but I was told down there at this convention in Willow Creek that we had about in September that it was a water tank so that they could water the road down to keep, to get it packed down harder. But anyway, to make the long story short, around over the Labor Day weekend, when the workers had put the tank in there on Friday and they come back on Tuesday, they found a lot of footprints around this in this fresh dirt where they put the tank in of 3 different sizes. And this is what they called Roger about and wanted to know if he could come down. Well, he approached me and asked me if I'd go down with him. I said, well, I'm going to have to call the boss and see what's going on and get some, because I had some cattle in and horses and a little ranch. And so I called the boss, and he said, you can work this week, and then he said, if you want, take a couple of weeks off because it's getting the fall of the year and things are slowing down a little bit in construction. And so this is what I did, and then we got our stuff together, and the last part of September, then we went down to the Bluff Creek area and set up a camp down there across the creek where had been an old log landing. And that's where it all kind of started from, is right down there, Robert, that's why we were down there. Roger was called, and we went on down, took my truck and one of my horses and 2 of his horses.
I see. That's been a question in my mind for a long time, and I'm so glad you told me, because I often wondered why you were there when we all know there's so much activity in the that diamond area, between Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams and Mount Rainier, etc. And I wondered, what in the world are you guys doing down there? Now I understand.
Well, that was the reason, because we just got rained out. Basically, we got rained out over around Mount St. Helens, because it rained so hard. And then, of course, he got all excited when he got the phone call from California that there was footprints. There are 3 different sizes of footprints.
Mm-hmm. Well, that explains that one away, that's for sure. Because I was going to ask you, there's been so many sightings around Sadis Pass,
Right.
And going down toward Rock Creek and things like that. In fact, the first tracks I ever found was over there toward Trout Lake, which I'm sure you're familiar with that area.
Oh, yes, I am.
Robert, could
Yes.
I sneak a question in here?
Oh, I wanted to introduce you, Steve. I was just getting ready to do that.
Yeah, I bet you were.
Bob, this is a very good friend of mine, Steve Jones. Steve had his own television show and radio show there in the Ohio area. And when I went back there, I did not believe that Bigfoot existed in Ohio. I really didn't. And it just didn't, it seemed preposterous to me, but because I'd been born and raised in that area. However, I had so many reports. I jumped in a plane, and I decided to fly it and take a look. And it completely changed my mind, totally changed my mind. And then I started doing some research, and in doing so, I met Steve. And he's quite the outdoorsman. He had his own outdoorsman show and all of that stuff. And as he says on our audio cassettes, and what I'd like to do after we get off the air, is give me a mailing address, and I'll send you some of these things down. I think you'll enjoy them.
Okay.
But he actually came face-to-face himself.
I sure did.
With a Bigfoot in Ohio. Anyway, Steve's a hell of a guy. He's been part of our foundation, and he made a special trip down to the studio just to be here with you. So he's a good guy. Stick with him. All right, Steve, what do you have to say to Mr. Gimlin?
Mr. Gimlin, first of all, I would like to say that I am one of those fans that Robert told you about. That since 1967, my whole world has changed, and just to have that experience, I share something with you because you've seen the elusive creature that we call the Bigfoot, the forest giant, the Sasquatch, whatever, but you've been a whole lot closer than me, and hopefully one of these days I'd like to sit down and pick your brain for about 2 or 3 weeks and talk about this a little bit more. But you mentioned something just a few minutes ago that you found in the area. You found 3 different sizes of footprints.
Steve, wait just a minute.
Okay.
They had found 3 different sizes of footprints, but I'll go on and tell you my part of this pretty soon here, in this deal if you want, or I can tell you right now.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to hear you.
Hey, Steve, I know it'd be a pleasure to meet you in person. I want to say that up front here because, anybody that has seen one of these things, because, Steve, I was a non-believer, too. And, Roger had told me a lot and played a lot of tapes and showed me some plaster casts of footprints. And, I'm kind of one of those guys that I've seen a lot of things in my life, but I have to see it to totally be convinced of these things because I didn't understand. I didn't understand about it. And so, consequently, I was... until I hadn't seen a footprint, a good solid footprint. And then when we get down to Northern California, the rain apparently had rained up and down the whole West Coast, similar to the way, did you hear what I told Robert about the rain in Mount St. Helens?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, I think probably it rained the same way down there. And when we got there, we went up to this site that they told us about, and all I could see was just big globs in the mud and the dirt there. There was no identifiable footprint whatsoever. I could see these 3 different sizes of whatever they thought, whatever was footprints to these people.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't see these 3 different sizes of footprints.
But even that you would mention that would support the theory that there were more than one in that area at that time.
Definitely, yes. Yeah. And then I'll talk about that, too, when we actually saw this creature, the one that we did see, what Roger was thinking at the time. And of course, things were happening so rapidly, I wasn't even thinking about that part of it. But I'll in this, whatever, however you guys want to go on.
Oh, you can continue. I can talk to myself all I want to. I only get to talk to you.
Okay.
I want to hear you.
Good show, Bob. Honestly, it really is.
Steve, the way this thing all happened, we went down there, and you probably heard me tell Robert how we got down there.
Yes, sir, I have.
And we made a camp, and we rode the horses all through the area just as much as we could cover, and you can cover quite a bit on a horse in one day. And then they were pushing the logging roads about 1.5 miles from where we were camped. We used to take my 1-ton truck and drive on those roads real slow at night, and with the headlights and a flashlight, and Roger'd stand out on the running board of the truck and see if he could see any trucks that would cross the road, see. So, because we were then about 4 miles of this tank that they'd put in for a water tank, see, to water the roads down.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we had to wait till night was because they were up there with cats and so forth working on pushing these roads back in. And those logging roads, they didn't make them very wide. So we couldn't be up there at the same time that they were trying to work on the road. So we'd wait till they quit at night, and then we'd take the truck and go up there, and we'd ride all day. And fortunately, we saw bear tracks, and we saw cat tracks, and we saw deer, and quite a few different kinds, sizes of them. But we never did see a good Bigfoot track crossing them fresh roads where they were blading them back in. So when we finally did, I'm going to kind of get ahead of things here a little bit. When we finally did see this creature, after we'd been there a little over 2 weeks, Roger's horse ran off, and he didn't want to be left there alone because this one appeared to be a female, and he figured that the male and the young one might be right there in the same area, right close, so he didn't want to be afoot.
Mm-hmm.
And his rifle was on the horse, and I had the rifle on my horse, but I wanted to follow the thing on up around when it got out of our sight. I wanted to follow it, and he didn't. He wanted me to come back because he said, I don't want to be here on the ground afoot if the other ones are here. And I can understand that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, so that was kind of what the scenario was there. And I think if I would have been in his shoes the same way, I would have probably felt the same way about it.
So do you think that you know, I've seen this film 1,000 times at least. Do you think that is why she kept looking back at you guys, to make sure that your focus stayed on her and not in away from her child or whatever the case may be?
Well, you know, I really can't say, Steve, but I'll tell you, the 2 times that the thing looked back, the creature looked back.
Right.
Well, the first time was when I rode across the creek with my horse and just sat on the horse. It was the first time that she turned her head and looked back.
Mm-hmm.
The second time was when I got off the horse with a rifle in my hand. Is when it looked back.
You know, when you came down there, Bob, if you can go back in time just a tad.
Sure.
Just before you came down on the Bluff Creek there, did you have any reaction inside you that would anticipate this encounter?
You mean anticipate the fact that I might see one?
Yeah.
Never even thought that I ever would see one. And I didn't, at that time, like I said before, I hadn't seen a footprint. And so I was still what you might call a skeptic, you know, because I just didn't understand, and I didn't really think that I knew they had to exist from the evidence that had been shown me before in the plaster cast that Roger had from different people that had seen the footprints and cast them. But, you know, by the same token, I just didn't quite have it straight in my mind where these things could look like, could be like. And until I saw that one, I was still yet not a non-believer, but I sure I didn't know exactly where my feelings were.
But you changed your mind? Oh, go ahead, Bob.
The reason I ask that is that there are times, for instance, my first encounter, which was in, 1957, I had a precursor, even though I didn't know why. I mean, I was a dumb kid from Ohio, and I was trying to bear hunt in Mason County, Washington. I had to get the hell off that ship I'd been on, and I decided that was the best way. And of course, back in those days, I had hair, and the hair actually started standing up on my arms, and I couldn't figure out why, because all I heard was something in the brush. And that's the reason I asked you, Bob, is just in case. I just wondered if coming down that creek bottom, if something hadn't alerted you subconsciously or something, but apparently not.
Oh, you mean the day of the sighting?
Yes.
Oh, well, the day of the sighting, I was pretty excited, but I was also fairly tired. You see, we'd been down there, and I'd rode hard every day and covered a lot of miles. And then we'd take that truck and go up there at night, and you know, I was kind of almost, and it was a sunshiny fall day in the middle of October.
Yeah.
And it was just one of them kind of lazy-like days, but we wanted to ride up some of those canyons that we hadn't ridden before. And actually, we had planned on staying out all night that night. Because I was going to have to go back. Roger wanted me to leave him down there And I said, and then come back and get him whenever I could get a chance. Well, I said, Roger, this is a long ways down here, and this little truck's pretty good gas guzzler. So I said, if you're going to stay, you're going to have to get you're going to get more transportation back, because I'm not going to be able to come back if I go back to work, and if we get a big job, I might work all through winter, and I'd already missed quite a little bit, so I didn't want to take a chance on it. But anyway, we had left out that midday to maybe stay all night up there, because it was warm in October. In the middle of October, it was really warm. And, and he was taking pictures of the beautiful maple leaves that was turning on the trees and so forth, and riding up the creek there. And there was a certain amount of maybe not what you're talking about, Robert, but at least I thought, well, I don't know. You always get that feeling when you're in the woods. Maybe something really is watching you, or there's something there that you don't understand. And that's kind of what the feeling was. I thought you meant when we first come down off the Onion Mountain. I don't know if you were familiar with that area, but there was a big steep mountain there they call Onion Mountain that we came down over and then crossed the creek and made our camp there. When I first made that statement, that's what I thought you meant.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's pretty close. I just wondered, because so many people that have had sightings, and believe me, I'm sure you have too. I meet so many people that come up with stories, and if you listen long enough, you realize it's all made up. But something that I have noticed among sightings that I think are 99% is there was sometimes a precursor of some sort. That would indicate, inside, there was something inside the person that said, hey, there's something wrong here. I know it happened to Steve.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course, he had nightmares after that, though, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Well, hey, I can relate to that. I'm still having nightmares.
Do you? It still affects you, Bob?
Well, I still think about that a lot, and just try to recap everything that happened, over the years, and once in a while I come up with something that I didn't think of for a long time, And it is. And I wanted to say this, too. This area that we actually saw this creature, I'd been there before. And the feeling that you're talking about, Robert, was there before more than it was actually the day that we actually ran into it.
Wow.
Because it was kind of an eerie-looking place. You can't see it in the film footage, but over there it would be off to, we were on, let's see, we would probably be called on the east side, taking a picture to the northwest. Mm-hmm. Well, in that area over behind where the film footage is, there's another little creek that come, a tributary of that one main creek come down in there, and it was all grown over kind of, and rock ledge there. And it was really kind of, I'd ridden past that before a couple of times, and I thought, boy, this is kind of an eerie feeling in here, like something's in there watching you, But I'd stop and I'd look and I'd wait, and I didn't hear nothing. And
isn't that a great feeling, though?
Well, yeah, it is. Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times Robert and I have been in the woods, and we'll look at each other and we'll say, nothing's going to happen tonight. And then we'll get into the woods another night and we say, all hell is going to break loose tonight. and you know what? A lot of times that has been the case, Mr. Gimlin. Yeah. It has been the case.
Well, have either one of you guys ever been stalked by a cougar?
No, sir.
You know what? I have been followed by one. I certainly have.
Yeah,
yes.
I was stalked by a real ugly girl once.
Beg your pardon?
I was stalked by a real ugly girl once.
Well, I wouldn't mind that, because they make sacks. but all girls are pretty. Some just prettier than others.
No, you talk about a diplomat. We're going to have to hire you into the State Department.
And you bet. Hey, I never saw an ugly girl. They're all pretty. Some just prettier than others.
That's right.
This is a cowboy talking here.
And some of them's they're just got a pretty nature, and they don't have to have a real pretty face.
This guy, what a charmer. Man, I'm going to have to go over and take some lessons from you, pal.
Yeah, I need it too, Mr. Gimlin. I'm married and got 4 kids. I could use all the charm I could get. I could use all the charm. Hey, I think that it's 9:30 here, and I think that for the listeners that are just joining, Robert, we should tell everybody who our special guest is once again.
Well, they should be looking in on the Artist First Network. This is Bob Gimlin. He was the gentleman who held the horses, as they say, so that Roger Patterson would have the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And without Bob, it would not have happened. It couldn't have happened because his horse ran off and there was no way out. But anyway, Mr. Gimlin is absolutely as important as anyone else in ever to bringing this to the public eye. And of course, we all know that there are so many skeptics out there that like to poke holes in that screwball that came up and said that he was a Hollywood stuntman and he had built the suit. Of course, unfortunately, he lost the suit. And I don't think that I would have been dumb enough to get in front of two Washington State cowboys who had rifles and pretend to be something I'm not. I don't think I'd do that. It's not a wise thing to do.
No.
But Bob, after that encounter, you've obviously relived that many, many times. What would be the one single thing that you think you could have done that would have changed the outcome?
Well, folks, I don't, Robert, you're too generous with my reputation, but thank you very much. But, folks, I don't know, probably at one time, if I had it all to do over again, I wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't have been there to start with. But since I was, and since it happened, and the way folks have accepted it in this modern day time, in 36 years, there's been really a change in attitude and opinions about these things, and I really do appreciate that. In my area up here, I took an awful lot of ridicule.
Did you?
And and me knowing what I seen and what I thought it was and everything, it was just, this thing that people talk about, a man in a suit, and I just figured no one could fool me that much, and even if they thought that could happen, like you say, who would be dumb enough to be in a suit with me with a 30-06 with 180 grain bullets in there, and I stepped down off my horse with it in my hand. And the reason I did that was in case it turned around and came back. I had no intentions of actually shooting this creature at the time because it was going away from me at all time. And so that was one of the main reasons why everything happened the way it did.
But you would have protected Roger.
I would have.
Yeah.
The creature was moving away from Roger and I both. It was not ever, it never came back, never turned and came back.
Bob, you're one of the few people on earth, really, that, of course, Steve is part of the club now, but when I saw that in 57, and I went back aboard ship, and I told people, I even reported to the police, I told them I'd seen an escaped gorilla, because I had nothing to equate it to. And I don't know, not the taunts, but the disbelief of something that you've seen is just absolutely, I don't know, I've learned more about my fellow human being, as I've said so many times, and our own self-imposed limitations than I have about the Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Because, my God, I can't understand when you've seen what you've seen. You've seen it. Steve's seen it. I've seen it. And someone turns and tells me that it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Robert, could I share just like a 2-minute version of my encounter with Mr. Gimlin?
I'd love that. I'd like to hear that. You bet.
Okay. We were down in our research area, and Robert was there, and it was about 9 o'clock at night, and we were planning what we were going to do that evening. And, Mr. Gimlin, we had that feeling. We had that feeling. In fact, I told my wife before I left, and let me tell you how secretive we were. She didn't even know where I was at.
That's right. I wouldn't allow anyone to tell anyone where we were going.
And I told Robert, I said, this is going to be a good night. And he just kind of he gets that little twinkle in his eye, and he just kind of winked at me, and he said, "Let's go." So we had a map laid out on the hood of my truck, and I had a CB antenna up on top of it. I had a little Ranger with a cap, and we were standing there, and it was getting around dusk, and all of a sudden something flew out of the woods. Now, we were probably about 20 yards away from the edge of the woods, and something hit my antenna. And I figured there were bats flying around, and it was, it was August, and it was muggy and everything, and I just noticed whatever it was landed on the ground. And I went over, and it was a stick, Mr. Gimlin, about 12 inches long and about an inch and a half in diameter.
Oh, be darned.
And just kind of kidding around, I threw it back in the woods where I thought it came from, and I said, hey, if you can't do any better than that, don't do it again. Mr. Gimlin, 2 minutes later, that same stick came out of the woods and almost knocked my head off.
Now, that would make you think, wouldn't it?
But you know what? I got so excited, and it was just an adrenaline pump and everything else, and I threw it back. And we had played with them that night. I mean, in our research area, and I'll tell you something, my life has changed so much since I met Robert because, like you, I had those blinders on, and he helped me take those blinders off to see the things that were right in front of my nose that I never realized before. But to make a long story short, we were, the guy that I was with and we were down by the edge of the water. And there was like a little peninsula that went out into the water, came back in. We heard something come down out of the woods. And I figured it was a deer or whatever the case may be. So we're just standing there by the lantern. And all of a sudden, things started falling in the water in front of us. And so I picked up bigger rocks and threw them over. Then, once again, to make a long story short, this huge rock came out and splashed right in front of me. And I told Glenn, I said, Glenn, it's time to go. Robert and another guy was up on the hill. I radioed him. I said, Robert, we're going in. And we went up and started walking down this logging road, and we had the flashlights on, and there walked right in front of me one of the most beautiful creatures that I've ever seen in my life. And it was just an emotional roller coaster because I knew that he was there. And he almost talked to me, Mr. Gimlin. He told me, don't worry, it's okay. I'm your friend.
I think you were talking to yourself.
No, well, I tell you,
love a duck,
I was filling my pants, but I mean, I was crying, I was laughing.
He was. I got it all on videotape, by the way, when I got back.
And Mr. Gimlin, that's not the best. He walked up into the woods and started screaming. And then another one started screaming. And then another one started screaming. And the fourth one started it.
So there was, isn't that something?
There were 4 in that area. Yeah, and I can vouch for a particular part of Steve's story because when I was out roaming, I had a Army Ranger with me. And we were out roaming, and Steve kept calling on the radio. So finally I went back, and he told me about this thing winging things off his aerial. I said, yeah, right. It's bats. You try to find something. But we walked up onto that little knoll, and I heard this whang go, and I turned on my flashlight, and sure enough, his aerial was whipping back and forth, and I went down, and he's not kidding. There was the stick. Yeah. So I said, okay, Steve, he's all yours. See ya.
And he did.
That was a really unique experience because they were actually playing games with you, weren't they?
Oh,
yes, they were.
And they have on several occasions. Yes, I think that they are just as curious about us as we are about them.
I think so, too.
Especially you, Steve.
Yeah.
Very curious about you.
Especially after that black bean soup that we used to eat at that little store there.
Oh, good God. As you can tell, Steve is down to earth.
Yeah.
But when they took him out there, Steve has the personality that is open to realities and not pre-suggestion. And in consequence, he did have a unique thing, and he and Glenn Atkins did see it. And when he screamed on the radio, and of course Dennis and I did a U-turn and got straight down there. But the story he told didn't surprise me because this is what they did do. Now, after your encounter, if you had it to do over again, I think I'd just ask you this, but is there anything you would have done differently at that moment, do you think, in time, Bob?
Well, not right at that time, but I think what we would have done, or I say we, I'm trying to talk for Roger now, but we talked about it, and I think maybe that I would have went ahead and tried to follow it up through the steep canyon, up the cliffs and stuff, after he got more film in the camera, I think we would have just and got the horses caught up again. I think we'd have tied the horses up and tried to make it up over that hill to at least try to have got another some more film footage of it, because it went out of sight around kind of around a bend in the creek where the hill came down, and then we followed it up that creek bed where there was just scuffs in the gravels where it ran, and then we found where it stepped in the creek and then on a rock a partial of a wet footprint. Mm-hmm. And Roger wanted to go back and get plaster casts made of the feet and stuff, because it was getting late in the after, the sun sets in October, late October like that, it sets pretty quickly. So in those mountains it was going over quick. And I think if we had it to do over again, we would have went ahead and got on up through there, because there were some little cliffs there about 8-9 feet that we could have kind of scaled, and another little bunch about another 10-15 feet that we could have got up through there. And it was kind of a break through them, and we assumed that's the way it went because that's where it crossed the creek. And I think we would have went ahead and tried again, but Roger wanted to get them casts made, like I say, and we were both so excited about everything that it was just like, here all of the time that I've been wondering about it, right here in front of me, it stands. And it's like, if you've ever hunted elk or any big game animal and you've kind of wanted to see a big bull elk or moose or bear or whatever, and then all at once, there it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And things happen so rapidly that you don't really realize what's all happening until afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Bob Titmus that followed it and reported that it had curved back on the far side, and he found where it had been sitting watching you?
That was the same hill I'm talking about, Robert. Bob Titmus went down. See, they had tried to bring the track dogs down from Canada. Mr. McCullough was going to fly them track dogs down, but see, it started raining down there again, and they couldn't even get up there because there was mudslides that we couldn't get out, and that's another story, part of the story. But anyway, we couldn't get out there because of the mudslides down the hill and so forth, and they couldn't get in with the dogs. So, and Bob and them guys, they went ahead after a couple of days, I guess, or the next day or whatever, when it quit raining. We'd already left by then, and they went up and they found where this thing had set down in the brush there, knocked the brush down and set, apparently, and had watched Roger and I down there while we were casting these footprints.
Boy, that's something, isn't it? Do you imagine it was sitting up there watching you?
See, and there's another thing about the curiosity of these creatures, in my opinion. And I thought that from listening to Roger before, I thought, well, they are kind of curious creatures. And that indicates right there what, but the only thing that really surprises me is that they only found where the one sat and watched us.
Yeah, the other two, I believe, was a young one, and I think she passed them by, and we'll get into that hopefully, on another program, because I hope the hell you come back.
Okay. I
really do. Now, let me ask you, Bob, you are of Native American heritage, are you not?
Yes, I am. Yeah. My grandmother was Indian.
And she was Yakima?
No, she was Cherokee Apache.
Oh.
No! Oh, my God, we are related.
I'll be darned.
Yes, my dad was, too.
Is that right?
Cherokee Apache. Oh, my God, Bob, I didn't believe that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Jesus, maybe we're related.
We could be, by golly,
Wow, that's
they took a white name to be able to stay off the reservation. The story I was told, and my dad was always kept away from all of that because he was the only child. And she died real early. My grandmother died real early in life because she contracted tuberculosis from my granddad. He was a miner, and the Indians, of course, they didn't have an immunity to that tuberculosis,
no,
and they contracted it and she died real early in life, and so anyway, but he was kept away from that side of the family because back in those days, an Indian was not very much thought of, and especially the Apaches were They were supposed to be bad, but they really weren't, I guess, because would have been my grandmother's dad. He worked for a white man, as the story went, that I found out later on in life, and they changed the name from his Indian name to Daniels, so that he didn't have to go on a reservation, and he worked in a feed mill for this white man.
My grandmother married a man whose mother had left Fort Sill, had escaped Fort Sill, and changed her name to a Mexican name because it was illegal for a Chiricahuas to be off any res.
That's right.
And good God, Bob, I can't believe it. That's incredible. Jeez. Well, we keep trying to tell everyone that Chiricahua Apaches were so sweet, like us.
They weren't bad people. They just didn't like to be pushed around.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you push us around, you got a problem. Well, because I was going to ask you my next question. See, I assumed, look out for that word, assume. I assumed you were Yakima, and I was going to ask you how the Native Americans up there reacted, because I know the south part of the res, they really don't like white people, especially on the south slopes of Mount Adams.
Okay, I'll give you a little story. I don't know the names, and I think I wouldn't be legally telling you the names if I knew them for sure. Last year, there was one sighted over there by a young man, and he thought it would be beneficial for him to shoot it.
Oh, my God.
That he would, become famous. Mm-hmm. Well, he did shoot it and wound it. And the elder Indians here, they come down on him like a cow on a flat rock. Mm-hmm. And then he started having bad luck. And what I understand, the first thing that happened to him, he wrecked his new pickup, totaled that out. Then his wife left him. Mm-hmm. And then he fell and broke his leg. Mm-hmm. And then shortly after that, his house caught on fire and burned down. And the elders said, that's because you shot the Bigfoot and wounded it.
Bob, it's so strange that we even say these things. First of all, I find out you're a brother. Then I find out I'm working on a book called The Soul Snatchers for a publishing company I'm working with. Uh-huh. And the thing that I wrote about today, this day, is bad luck that happened to a Miccosukee down in Florida because of the same situation.
Well, I'll be darned.
This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, now let's see, because I was going to ask you how the Native Americans reacted to you, but obviously you're not near your tribal area.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Now, we usually have, Bob, we've run way over. We only have an hour. We usually have our listeners send in some emails. Would you mind if we turn to them? Because honestly, before we even do that, would you come back on my show again?
Yeah, I would, Robert, whenever I can get a chance to do it. You'd have to let me know, and I'd have to plan it ahead of time. See, I'm still riding young horses, and every day I ride, and then, the days are short now, but I do get in the evenings. Then I work down here at the tire store some, and... we'll
do it at your convenience, my friend.
Okay. Well,
be at your convenience. And I'm not that far. By the way, I'm over here in Montana.
Oh, you are?
Yes. And
whereabouts in Montana?
I'm over in a place called Whitefish.
Oh, I know where Whitefish is.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I head over to the coast from time to time into the Seattle area, and I want to make damn sure the next time I come through your area, we have to snap a few caps.
Sure. Hey, just give me a holler ahead of time. Make sure I'm here. I do some riding in the mountains, but I don't. I'm getting old enough now. I don't like to stay up there and sleep out underneath them pine trees with a wool blanket like I used to.
Okay, Scott, do you have any emails? I know you have a ton, we've run way over. But Bob, honestly, it's your show.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to Steve too. I appreciate what he told me.
Oh, he's a neat guy. I hate to say that when he's listening.
Mr. Gimlin, let me tell you something. I have been so excited about this since I found out. You were just one of my heroes.
Hey,
one of my
thank you
heroes.
very much. I appreciate that.
Steve told me he was going to wear Depends when he went down there.
Yeah,
Well, anyway, yeah, maybe
He's our kind of guy, Bob, I can tell you.
Well, it sounds like it.
Yeah, he is.
I suppose we better get back to Scott and see what he's got there.
Yeah, because we love to involve our listeners, because our listeners are very rare individuals. If you can imagine, every 2 weeks they sit down for 2 hours to listen to my nonsense, and on alternate weeks, once a week, they sit down for an hour, and we have thousands, and I'm not kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and this is around the world. Mr. Zalesko, I hate to wake you up.
Yes, unfortunately, we haven't received any emails. I'm joking.
I assume that.
We have received more emails than I can count, and certainly more than any guest we've ever had on this broadcast in the 200 episodes we've aired.
You know what you do, Scott? Hold on to those, and here's the reason why. What we'll do is, because we hate to disappoint our guests. After all, they're supposed to be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And what we'll do is we'll schedule Bob back as soon as he stops beating up those horses out there. And we'll hold those emails, and we'll be able to answer them. But let's take as many as we can now between now and 9 o'clock.
Okay, the first one comes to us from Lauren Coleman.
Oh, of course.
It says, this is, hi, Bob at Gimlin and Bob Morgan. This is Lauren Coleman here. First off, great to learn you were going to be on the show tonight. Of course, much has been written about the Patterson-Gimlin film, and we all have watched it scores and scores of times. So for most people, the event lives in words and images. So my question for you tonight is, in a couple of dimensions of the event, would you share what you remember from two other senses of the experience? What, if any, noises did you hear from the Bigfoot? And what animal smell do you remember it had? And what animal smell does that remind you of? Thank you very much. Best of health, Lauren Coleman.
Okay, Lauren, I'll be quickly with this. I heard no noises at all, even when the creature turned and looked at me. And the smell to me similar to a skunk, if you're familiar with skunk smell. And of course, Roger had a little bit different opinion of that, but everybody smells things different. He said it smelled like a wet dog rolling in cow manure. So, but I guess I was a little bit different there, and I thought it smelled just like a similar to a musky skunk smell.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, sir?
Lauren's not online, so it'll.
Yeah,
have
we have. Of course, Lauren is listening in, and I believe somewhere near the East Coast.
Lauren, by the way, you got to get on the show, pal. Okay, next.
All right, coming up next. This is from Tom Cousineau, and once again, I want to publicly thank Tom Cousineau for scheduling our guest tonight. And this says, from Tom and my soon-to-be future wife, engaged Consuelo. Mr. Gimlin, how did you feel during the Willow Creek Sasquatch Symposium when you returned for the first time back to the Patterson-Gimlin film video site since 1967?
Well, Tom, I was... At first, I hadn't planned on going down, and I'll have to be plumb honest with you. I think an awful lot of Al Hodson, and he'd asked me to come down, and I wanted to meet Jan Goodall. And, this sounds kind of crazy, but anyway, once I got down there, it was so rewarding and so exciting that it just, can't hardly even explain. And to listen to the different panelists talk, I had never had that opportunity. And it kind of devastated me to go up to try to find the exact location of the film sighting. I thought I could, in my mind, could walk right up there and say right over that, in that area was where it was taken. But everything had grown up so high, and the creek had rerouted and everything, and I flat was just kind of set back from it. And I should have known after 36 years it wouldn't be the same, but I didn't think it'd be that much different.
You know, Bob, by the way, I'm in communication with Jane Goodall and with her staff.
Uh-huh.
And so did you get a chance to meet her? I don't think you did you?
No, she didn't come to the conference.
Well, I think that that our little foundation, the American Anthropological Research Foundation, we are in communication with them. We are exchanging informations. And perhaps that opportunity will come to you again very soon.
I'd appreciate that a lot.
I will try.
Okay, thank you.
Next one, sir.
Okay, our next email comes to us from Craig Woolheater. He's from the Texas Bigfoot Research Center. And Craig writes, Mr. Gimlin, I wanted to thank you for being so gracious when I met you at the Bigfoot Symposium in Willow Creek last September. Listening to you recount the events of October 1967 that led up to, included, and followed the filming, that fateful day was, quite simply, worth the trip. If nothing else had gone on that weekend, it would have been plenty. I also want to extend an invitation to you and have you come down and attend and speak at our 4th annual Texas Bigfoot Conference next fall. We would be honored to fly you and your wife down here and put you up in a nice bed and breakfast. We are looking forward to the weekend of November 12th and 14th through 2004.
What's the question?
Well, I think it's more of an invitation. So, Craig,
you are a sweetheart, and it is true, Bob. Craig Woolheater is a very serious young man. He truly is.
And he's a great supporter of the show, too, Bob.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, Scott, I haven't got anything from him, but I'd be real happy to do whatever I could for him if he wants to send it to me, to my address there. I do have some obligations that I've already committed myself in May, and then in June it'd be the 5th and 6th of May, and then the 25th of June down in Texas. So if he could coordinate it while I was down there in Texas, I'm supposed to go down there for a Mr. Moore. I don't know if
Chester
you guys
Moore. Chester Moore. He's been on the show, sure.
Chester Moore.
Yeah.
This gentleman asked me to come down in June, 25th of June, I think it was. I don't have it right here in front of me now, but Chester, I met him at the Willow Creek symposium there, and nice guy. Met him and his father both. Really nice people, and so I'm going to try and make it down there. If I'm still healthy, if a horse don't stomp me down again, and break me up or something, well, I'll be there probably. But yes, tell him that if he wants to send me something on my address here in Yakima, Washington. But I don't want to take a lot of time just rattling about things like that. Go ahead, Scott, with whatever you have
All
on
right.
there.
This is one of our regular listeners, and we appreciate Gene in Vermont. And Gene writes, Mr. Gimlin, thank you so much for coming on the show. My question is about the X Creature program from a few years ago, in which you said it was possible that Roger may have staged the incident and used you as an unknowing witness. Do you still feel this way, and did Roger ever hint in later years that was the case?
No, he never did. Roger, right up to his death, did some apologizing to me for him and his brother-in-law cutting me completely out of it. I never gained anything monetary from it at all. And Roger, on his deathbed, apologized to me and said, when I get well, Bob, we'll mount another expedition, and we'll go back down in there, the Mount St. Helens area, and he said, we will get some more evidence, and we'll shove it down these doubters' throats. And I said, Roger, sounds good, but I knew he was dying, so I said, yes, we'll sure enough do it.
Now, did he use that word doubters?
Oh, what's that again?
Did he use the word doubters? I'm just teasing you, Bob.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
That Roger, he was quite a guy.
Yes, he was.
But he died a horrible death. So I tried to go see him, even though I was a little bit bitter at him and his brother-in-law both. Well, a lot bitter at the time, but I got over it. I love Roger's kids and family, and so I thought I'd do what I could for them, because Roger died a horrible, miserable death,
Well, I saw him a couple of weeks before he died, and he graciously gave me a couple of slides and things like this, and we had a nice conversation. But you know what it comes back to, and forgive me, but this is I'm German and Apache mixed, so that makes a hell of a combination. Also Scorpio, by the way. Come November 9th, you give me a bow and arrow or a Luger, I'll start a war anywhere.
I'm with you, brother.
You know what I mean. But I often have wondered, and here we're slipping back into our heritage a bit, is what happened to Roger, was it indeed bad luck?
Well, that's kind of the way I looked at it, Robert, but, I kind of hated to speculate on that, because Roger had been sick years before that and had completely recuperated from it and was really doing good up until the time after this this, and of course the old Indians and stuff that I talked to said, "You're next," you know. So I thought, well, maybe so. I don't know, but of course I had an awful lot of horse accidents that tried to kill me after that, and they just can't kill an Apache, you know.
It's tough. Well, it is tough.
No, I'm just bragging now, but anyway, you know, an old man like me, I'm 72 years old, and I'm still breaking young horses that these young guys can't ride.
Wow.
Hey, I'm 68, and I'm still chasing them.
Anyway, and I feel good, and I'm young, and I'm for my age, and as many times I've been broke up, I'm strong and I'm in good shape.
Well, Bob, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our hour. And
Scott, I'm sorry we didn't get everything covered there that we should have, and I sure appreciate you guys having me on down there, Robert, and nice to talk to Steve, and someday maybe I'll get a chance to talk to Steve some more about his encounter, because I'm very interested in that.
Well, we can arrange it, and and Bob, I can tell you, a quick email or a call to Artist First, and you are at the top of the list anytime you want to come on my show, my friend.
Okay, thank you.
In the interim period, I will get your number and all that stuff from. We don't want to publish this because your phone will go crazy, but I'll get the number and I'll get a hold of you, and we will stay in touch from now on. Time's too short, my friend, so we won't pee it away. Thank you very much to everyone around the world who sat next to their PC all this time. I'm sure the time was not wasted, and I hope that my friend and my tribal brother, I didn't know, will definitely come back. We send in your emails to Scott Zalesko. We'll make these available, and thank you so very much, Steve, for making your trek down.
Oh, I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
I didn't think you would. But anyway, my friends, thank you so very much. Bob, have a nice evening. Tell your wife she does a wonderful job of protecting you, and that's the way it should be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'll be over, and we're just going to have to go out and do some stomping together.
Right on. And tell Tom thanks again for coordinating this with me, and I know it was kind of, I kept, not being able to get back with him and everything, but once we finally got this, down here, at least I could get things down here where I'm working, and more so at home because I'm not home that much. But anyway, thanks again, everybody, and I hope that somebody gained something from it, and I answered some of the questions that people had in their mind.
Mr. Gimlin, there is a ton of emails here. I'll print every single one out and put it in a folder for the next time that you're on. These good people have sent us emails from all over the world because you were on tonight.
Well, tell them I apologize for not being able to answer all their questions, but maybe sometime we can do that.
Hey, we'll do a marathon show.
Let's schedule it as soon as is convenient for you, my friend. You move to the top of the area. Anyway, okay. Have a nice evening. Give your wife a hug for me, and don't be surprised if I call you and I'm on my way.
Okay. Hey, thanks again, Robert.
Yeah,
Take care.
Mr.
Good night
Mr.
to
Gimlin.
Everyone. I beg your pardon?
I just want to say, Mr. Gimlin, it was an honor and a pleasure to talk to you, and believe me, I'll get your address and you'll be hearing from me.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. Good night now.
Okay. Good night to everyone around the world.
Good
Thank
night,
you
Robert.
so much. I'm Robert W. Morgan, and I will be talking to you next week. Tune in. You never know what the hell's going to happen on the Robert W. Morgan Show. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
This rare